Welcome to the podcast of the European Society of Anesthesiology and Intensive Care. I am your host, Alex Rawlings, and today I would like to introduce you to Professor Doris Østergaard. Professor Østergaard holds a professorship in medical education and simulation at the University of Copenhagen and is head of research of the Copenhagen Academy for Medical Education and Simulation, CAMES, capital region of Denmark. She is also chair of the ESAIC Simulation Committee. Her research activities are within the areas of patient safety, clinical and simulation-based training of individuals, teams and organizations. Her goal is to link these areas through her educational and research activities. Professor Østergaard, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you.
So I would like to start with my first question. It's been over 30 years since To Err is Human highlighted the scale of preventable harm in healthcare. Change has been slow, but it has been happening, and there is still a long way to go. What do you think have been the greatest obstacles to change?
Well, I think that it has been very difficult for healthcare professionals to look further than being a medical expert. So making them to see that human factors are important, that you need to train social and cognitive skills in order to support the medical expertise skills.
Okay. And what dogma has been the most difficult to overcome?
I think the most difficult one was to see one, do one, to change that paradigm and make people see that it's necessary actually for learners to try to apply knowledge and skills in, for instance, a simulation. And that's sort of the patient safety part of it. And the debriefing part, where the reflection about the simulation takes place, it's sort of where the pedagogical aspect of simulation is seen as important.
And do you think that simulation has really helped evolve the pedagogy of medical education?
It has. There's a lot of literature, there's evidence that simulation works, that it's possible to transfer the skills from the simulation setting to the clinical setting, and that actually it's not only looking at do they learn, but you can also look at outcome and see that it actually improves patient outcome.
And what do you think have been the greatest obstacles for having simulation more involved in medical education?
I think it has been to make people change. Professors, they think they are good lecturers, and they are, but that's not enough. So how can we convince people that you need sort of a toolbox where you sometimes take a lecture, sometimes take a workshop, practical skill station, and sometimes you take up, well, now we need to do simulation-based training. And simulation-based training is much more than a mannequin. It is also role-playing with actors, for instance. Then, of course, one of the obstacles has been the financial issue, that simulation is more expensive because the team in the simulation setting is 4 to 6 to 8 people, whereas in a lecture room you can encompass 300, 400 people. So it's a matter of saying, well, when do I use what for what learning objectives? I already mentioned the professors, because not all the professors wanted to join a simulation faculty, but some did. And it has been a fruitful collaboration with people knowing how to run simulation and professors, so they sort of do things together, develop together.
And what obstacles to change have you faced personally in your career, and how did you overcome them? Can you give us any examples?
Well, I think I always believed in simulation. So actually I started doing simulation in 96. That's many years ago. And my first success was to convince the National Board of Health that this is something that we should do in Denmark. It was in 99. But often you were ahead of time. That you saw that this is going to be big, this is important, but people didn't believe you. And then sometimes you just have to wait, step aside and say, well, how do I then convince them? Which data should I collect? Which research should I do in order to convince the decision makers that this is the right thing to do?
It's the challenge for every visionary, isn't it? That they often see the potential before others see it. And it's then the difficulty of helping others to see that vision in the way that you see it and the potential that it
you
exists.
see the need of the learner, of the patients and the organization, and you try to develop things that will solve the challenges that they have. So, and I think it's more important than ever because the technological evolution is so fast. We are short of staff, so we need to find ways where you can train people very rapidly to make them feel confident, and that we as educators can trust that they can actually handle the patients in a safe way. Yeah.
What change do you think would accelerate most the integration of a safety culture?
Well, I think we should measure patient safety culture. And then I think we should use the data both at a local level, because it's not sort of the truth that you get by measuring patient safety culture, but you get something that you can discuss in your team or department and wonder, why do people answer like this? What's beneath it? And that discussion is very fruitful for learning and to improve. And the other thing is that I think we need to collect data at an organizational level. For instance, in my own region, it is clear that anesthesiologists are much more mature than surgeons. But we work in a team in the OR. So what does it mean that we have a different opinion on patient safety culture? What does it mean for patient safety? And if we are, as an anesthesiologist, we are very mature. We have worked with this for many, many years, but the surgeons have not. So we are not to scold them, we are to get them in order to help them understand why is what we do so important.
And nurses as well are very aware of safety.
Yes.
And they're part of that team as well, aren't they?
We also know that if staff are healthy, not mentally strained, it has a positive impact on teamwork, and a good teamwork have a good influence on patient safety. So it's that there are different things to do to improve what we do for patients.
And I know that at Kames you do a lot of work with psychological safety.
We do.
And could you say a little bit about that?
I think it's so important that we learn in the workplace. It's important to go at a conference like this, but it's also important to learn at home with the team you work with. And in order to do that, we need to have a safe learning environment where it's okay to give feedback, not only to trainees, but to seniors and to other professions. Again, the anesthesiologist, the surgeon. But it's so easy not to do it. If you're not psychologically safe, you don't ask questions, you don't ask for feedback, you don't speak up if you see that something could be improved for the patient. So it's really dangerous if we don't have that psychological safe environment.
And that's part of what we call a just culture, isn't it?
It is. And in my country, we had the Act of Patient Safety in 2004, and established a confidential reporting system, which is now it has developed. So now we actually say, well, we don't want incidents of no value. We want people to report the things that can provide learning for others. So it's really about being more not standing still, but moving forwards with all this.
And is there resistance to that? Is there resistance to being more open and transparent about incidences that have gone wrong, or even near misses that could provide an opportunity for learning?
Yes, It's not all that easy because we also have a government looking at what's going on. Of course, they want to find the rotten apples.
Yeah.
But for me, as an educationalist, I want to identify the spots where we can improve.
Yeah.
And you cannot improve if it's not a safe learning environment. So you have to understand that errors, mistakes happens.
Yeah.
And we have also worked a lot with training the learners to provide information about incidents to patients and relatives. And it means being able to provide an excuse. Say, I'm sorry, but on behalf of me or the organization that this happens to you, we would like to learn from it. And in Denmark, it's also possible for patients to report to the incident system. And we have been discussing, would it be fruitful that we do it together, the patient and the persons involved in it?
Yeah.
Because then you have both sides of the coin, so to say. But that doesn't work yet, but it could be a way forward.
It could be surprising, the type of results that come out of that.
So for instance, for medical students, already at that point, we learn them how to inform patients and relatives about an incident. And I think that's the way forward, that we start early. And for that, we also use simulation. Not a mannequin, but an actor.
And have you had any feedback from patients and relatives that have been on the receiving end of this new skill set?
We have not collected data as such, but we know that they really appreciate to get an excuse for what happened. And I think almost all of them, they see the need for a learning system, and that this will not happen again to another person. And that's the important thing.
In all learning systems, mistakes are an integral part of a process of learning.
You learn from them.
You learn from them, and you can't even have a learning process without mistakes. So it's a shame that we missed that opportunity. And what have been the most notable advancements in patient safety in your view?
Well, I think it's the focus on social and cognitive skills. We previously called them non-technical skills, because that's the term that they used in aviation, but somehow it doesn't fit in our world. So we have gone back to the definition of non-technical skills, and that's social skills, communication, leadership, collaboration, and the cognitive skills, which is situation awareness and decision making. And I think almost all departments, they focus on social skills in trauma team training, in cardiac arrest training, but we do not do so much is being explicit about how we as an expert gather information, our situation awareness, and how we take decisions. So that's what we need to work more with, both in simulation and in the clinical setting. So if you are the consultant, you have to explain to the junior, why did I decide as I did, and on what premises.
I think there are many surprises there as well as to how experts make decisions and how they are connected not only to experience but to emotion and perception, and there's a wealth of experience there to pass on to the younger generations. And
also as anesthesiologists, we very seldom work together. You have your OR, you are in a room in the intensive care, and I think we should spend more time on sort of trying to improve, and that means that I ask you, will you go with me for this case, and would you please focus on my communication with the relative or the child, and you give me feedback, because I want to improve continuously.
I know there are other organizations like the Fire Brigade in America, even the military, they use simulations for training decision making. Can you give an example about how you train decision making in a simulated environment, in a simulator?
A very good example is airway management, and the dangerous thing is the unanticipated difficult airway situation, because that happens so seldom, and there I see a change, at least in my institution, that they call for help early. The consultant call for help early, so that there are 2 consultants in the room, and they help each other. They get we have nurses, so the nurse takes care of the monitoring and finding the things that they need. But they have a dialogue together in sort of discussing, well, we have this situation. Is it a situation where we need to progress because surgery is an emergency operation, or is it an elective case where we should decide to wake up the patient? So they help each other with that decision. And if you hear them, they are really sort of collecting vital parameters. Who are we? What are we experienced in doing? The patient, what's best for the patient, and the surgeons in the room. So it's sort of a decision based on many parameters. And that makes it more better. It makes it better.
I can understand. It takes a weight of the responsibility away as well.
So we run that simulation. We run it in the simulation center. Both for the juniors and the seniors.
And how do the seniors respond to that?
I think they realize that it's a good thing to train this because it happens so seldom. And if you manage to provide them feedback, create the safe environment, then they really like it. And they appreciate the debriefing where they can actually discuss with each other, because that's so seldom possible in the clinical setting.
And that's also because there's simulation centers maintain standards for psychological safety in their debriefing.
Yes, and have a structure for debriefing and create a safe learning environment also there.
And that also leads me to a question about the pace of which we are developing and collecting medical information and research means that learning now has to be a continuous lifetime process. The old model of you do your time in medical school and you come out and you have your time as a resident or trainee and then you are established in your field is no longer the paradigm that we are dealing with. Collecting big data means that we are processing an enormous amount of new information. So how do you see simulation playing a role in continuous medical education, especially for those who are at the latter end of their career?
What we're doing right now is we have done a study. We have surveyed anesthesiologists in how often they use a given airway management tool, for instance. We have developed an e-learning platform where you can test your knowledge. And it's an adaptive system. So you answer the multiple choice question and then you answer whether you know or you guess, sort of. There's a four like scale. And then there are learning resources there. And then you have your results. And when you come back 3 months or 6 months later, the system adapts to where you had difficulties the last time. So it sort of gives me the information of where do I focus on knowledge, on consultants' knowledge. Then they also, in the questionnaire, they said, well, we want to train every half year on skill training, airway management. So this is established now, and we try to develop sort of checklists to see, well, where are they, can they do it? And it's not that they fail, but they get feedback on where they were really good, keep on doing this, where do you have difficulties, and how will you then overcome these difficulties? When will you ask for help in the clinical situation? So it's not now you're grounded, you're not allowed to do airway management. It's about refining your skills as a senior. It's not that they can't do it. And then we discussed whether it would be possible half a year later to run team training for the nurse and the junior and the senior. And in the simulations to take situations like the unanticipated difficult airway or anaphylactic shock, or the situations where you need to improve your situation awareness and your decision-making skills.
And your response time.
Yeah.
And do you find that senior practitioners are open to this? Is there a specific way that you have to sell this to them?
I don't. Not all are ready.
Yeah.
But if you start, and the consultant who has already been there go home and said this was a great experience, then the others will come.
Yeah, I can understand. And what do you think lies on the horizon for simulation-based education?
Well, we are very eager to use simulation as an analysis tool, both looking at patient safety incidents and errors, and try in the simulated setting to sort of create the situation, run the situation, and learn from it. And also that there is a movement, they call it translational research, translational simulation, where you take the simulator out in the clinical setting and you test different situations. For instance, a patient comes in with the stroke in the emergency unit, and you sort of look at what happens. And you can also do FRAM analysis, where you afterwards sort of interview the people in why did you choose to do as you did. You can look at workflow. And what we have done recently is that the hospital were to move to a new environment, where the hospital asked us to run 10 different scenarios to see what happens if a patient comes to the emergency unit, what happens in the OR, what happens in the neonatal resuscitation unit. And we did that before they actually moved in, and we identified so many patient safety threats. And some of them they actually had to do something about before they moved in. So it has a great potential. And the thing is that if you move out and do the simulations in the real setting, the staff involved in the simulations, they feel that they are part of identifying the challenges, but also to identify possible solutions, which actually will help implementation of the stuff. So I believe in simulation as an educational tool, but also as an analysis tool. That's the future.
And it's also incredibly empowering for the staff that may already be aware of potential problems but don't have the avenue of being able to communicate that and to make a change happen, and then you can come in with a simulator and prove a problem. And for them they can see change happening. Which is hugely important.
And I think that's important for them, because in a reporting system, if nothing happens based on the report, then they are frustrated. But if they can see, well, now they actually look at handover or whatever, and we do something about it.
It's hugely hope-giving. What excites you most about your current work?
That we still develop. And I think, as we discussed this morning, you have to take the path upwards and continue to look at what are the challenges and how can I contribute to solve them. That we have to be much more transformative, we have to be innovative, and I think it's my job to help that.
It's a wonderful message, and
not only me, the simulation committee.
Exactly, and the amount of people that dedicate their time to that and the work that you do. Doris Østergaard, thank you very much for your time. That was a fascinating interview. Thank you everybody to listening to this episode. The ESAIC releases monthly podcasts on the ESAIC website and various streaming platforms. We hope you will join us for the next one.